Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together, we gather together, we come into the tavern out of the cold. It was a dark and stormy night, and we tell stories. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. This is episode 3. Episode 3 of Dragons and Men. That's what I've named these this prequel to the Trouble in Party Town. So if you haven't listened to Trouble in Party Town, listen to that first, or listen to the prequel first and then listen to the sequel, Trouble in Party Town. What we have is a world of men and dragons. Men and dragons live together peacefully, cohesively. They cohabitate. They help to even each other out. They help to smooth each other's deficiencies over. But there is trouble coming. There's trouble in River City, but it's real this time. There's some great discord coming. The breaking is happening. We know because of Trouble in Party Town that a great breaking will happen, right? The world will be turned into turmoil and chaos. Most of the dragons will be killed. But we're just trying to figure out how it is that happened. We have a hero who was sent here, maybe, kind of, by the gods, or by the god, the creator, to stir the pot, to turn the kiln on, to light the kiln, to begin the great test, to see if this world can stand up to all that it was made for. We have the wise old man, the angelic being sent by the creator to be the herald of the change, someone to watch and see if things would change as they would. We have the villain's sidekick, the flashy, what was his name, Lance?
I called him Flash. He was kind of a trickster and a kind of a scam artist.
Yep. People are deceived. The standard method for getting a dragon has been, for the last hundreds of years, that you'll be attracted to their psychic emanations and you'll go to them, and then when they hatch, you sort of form a bond with them, and then you go on from there, you learning from them about their history, them learning from you about your ambition. However, factory farms, mutilated births, people aren't following the norm. People aren't following the tradition of how it is that it works. People are trying to get a lot of dragons very quickly. People are trying to manipulate the bond between human and dragon. People are trying to manipulate nature and nature's order in order to get as much as they can get out of the bond. Dragons are doing the same thing. They are also doing the same thing. These are the last days before the breaking of the world. Mm-hmm. What story elements did you guys have for this week?
I have random element, or a random insert, I should say.
I have goal. So that is either the goal for the whole thing, the goal for a particular character. That's what I have.
And I have happy ending. So even though the story will end in the breaking of the world, there will be a happy ending.
I kind of like to put my random insert in first because it's kind of still, even though this is the last episode, it's kind of a setup element, if that's all right.
Sure. Give us some context for it, though. Fill in some world with it, though.
Yeah. It's a character. He's kind of a minor player, but he has a big impact. And this is some time ago. Crandall was set out to gather dragon scales. And there's the thing about this economic system, the energy is procured by the use of these stones, which turns out to be dragon scales.
Well, presumably it will be. We don't know what the economic system is right now.
Right.
That will be
the
economic system in the future.
Yeah. And I feel like the random insert that I have is like going from just scarce use of these things. Crandall was kind of a rock climber, and there was a site where people had been able to pick up some of these dragon scales,
right.
And he went climbing along this ridge line, and the site he was going to, he knew had been pretty picked over, but it was still valuable for him to do it. But he was doing the climbing, and there was he had a little bit of an accident, and they dislodged some rock, and there was a rock fall. He wasn't hurt; he was fine. But this one rock kind of went down, fell off the edge of this ridge, and crashed and cracked in half. And it was he could tell from the sunlight it was a crystalline form inside this rock. So he climbed down because he wanted, step aside and see what is this thing, And so he had these shards of crystal, and he put them in. He had several sacks because he was planning on loading up on these dragon scales. But he threw them in his bag, and he climbed back up, and he got up to the site, and he was working around, and he found a couple of places where people had kind of picked over, and this was taking longer than he wanted, especially with his little detour. And then there was a resonant, kind of a harmonic from his sack that had these crystals. And he realized these crystals were reacting to something. And it got louder with more energy as he got close. And then he uncovered it was another kind of a strip of these scales that had been undisturbed. And he realized this was really cool. He was able very quickly to locate all he could carry. And he went home, and he was a little bit of a hobby guy, and he used made a wood frame kind of a thing, and he made a bunch of these, a little handy device to hold these crystals, and he began selling these scale finders, scale scanners, and he developed quite a little cottage industry. But the result was it had a big impact on their village and then to the city close by, and they became a lot easier to find, and people would go out with these scanners, and instead of, happening upon them by accident and then just gleaning every scale you could get in the surrounding area, it became easier to find deposits, and especially like old dragon graveyards. Anyway, it had the effect of, like any economy that has cheaper energy, it tends to increase productivity and just increase value of life, And so this was what I thought would be an interesting random insert, that it was developing less scarcity in the society, so to speak. What I mean by that is that here one very powerful element of their daily existence or these scales, and they became easier to procure and less expensive, so to speak. So I just thought that would be, if we're heading toward the breaking, there would be kind of people with more time on their hands and to get into mischief.
Yeah, it's interesting because my idea of before the breaking is more of like an Age of Legends from Wheel of Time,
Okay.
Like people aren't hunting for scales. So I'm not putting down your idea. I'm just going to explain what my idea was. Is that it was more like really like the technology that's so powerful that it looks like magic. Magic's so powerful that it looks like technology, like flying cars and stuff like that, flying things. But I think what you have said here is that the breaking had a couple of really dramatic moments, right? Where whole cities were kind of destroyed and mountains were rearranged and things were broken. But in reality, society came apart at the edges first, right?
Okay.
So this place, what's his name?
Crandall,
he is living in a village, right? And his parents say that like just 10 years ago, they had a steady supply of, they had a steady power supply coming to power all of their systems, right? This was an ancient form of power that the world made, that the union between man and dragon were able to innovate and create. And they say 10 years ago, it was here. They had a steady supply of it, right? And Crandall's grandparents say that 30 years ago, or that 10 years before Crandall's parents were born, they had like control of the weather, And so what you see is you see that society was falling apart at the edges. And so it's kind of like now Crandall lives in a village where before villages weren't really a thing because everyone could reach any city in the world in a matter of minutes.
Mhm.
But now he lives in a village, right?
Yeah.
And now he hunts for dragon scales because the dragons have been dying off because of the Great Plague. So he hunts for dragon scales now and uses them to create this energy source. And then they've started to use them for other things now, like heating, and levitating heavy loads and things like that. And, a bunch of different applications that we don't even hear about in Trouble in Party Town. But what we're seeing is that like society all of civilization used to be much higher, and it's been coming apart since then. So yes, there will be a great breaking, a great moment, a great terrible thing. But I think from what I understand, Reed, is that your element here is to show that things have been coming apart for a while now.
Yeah,
because my idea is that everything was like super technology and the breaking happened and then things started to break down. But with yours, it's like, oh no, things were already breaking down at the edges,
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that jive with you? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess I saw it just a little bit differently, but I don't think it changed. I think will fit better the way you explained it.
Well, how did you see it?
I just saw that this was. I didn't see. I saw this as a pre-breaking thing where they were kind of headed toward less scarcity. But I was just imagining the way things would be looking in this world.
Okay, so yours was like before the Great Golden Age.
Yeah, see, I saw this as a kind of a breakthrough.
Interesting.
That changed from grubbing for these, just randomly coming across places, because the dragons were real secretive about their death rituals, and oftentimes they would be places, and it would just be like random chance in the rough country coming across one of these things, and this was the major energy source, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this, what I envisioned was this guy coming across a mechanism for to build scanners that would easily identify them, and it became much. That's like if you have an oil-based economy and the only way to get oil is in these very few places, drilling really deep wells, and it's really costly, and then all of a sudden somebody finds like the La Brea tar pits and you have all the oil you could ever dream of just readily available beneath the sand.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I understand now.
Yeah.
So
I was just a little bit backwards from your thinking.
Your example is on the beginning of the Great Golden Age and not on the end of the Great Golden Age.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I would see it this way, if you want my input on it.
Yeah.
It probably would side more on Reed's side of things, but I would see that something like that happening before, right? Someone might have one of these scales, or someone really important might have, like, not that a suit of armor would be, but like something ceremonially where it's like, oh, wow, yeah, I've collected so many of these. I have status. I have importance. I make jewelry out of these, like, right? Because they're kind of rare. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why people kind of look for them. But then in finding them in mass and finding that they have other properties would add an element of, oh, well, we could farm these out. Right.
Right.
And now instead of looking at the dragons, it's just one more, let's say, piece of the puzzle that pushes the divide between, well, what do we need you for? Except that, we can then harvest, if we can grow you big enough, fast enough, then we can kill you or find where you're shedding all your scales in a controlled farm, right? And then now we can have an endless supply of this energy source, right?
Absolutely.
Which wouldn't necessarily be that at first. It would just be like, oh, wow, like, this is something that like revolutionizes and we can find the old things and it's like really helpful, but then turns like going, oh, okay, well, now that we've basically emptied out the 6 or 7 known kind of burial pits, right? And this is now the new mode. How are we going to get more, right? Something that
Absolutely,
adds
yeah.
to the breaking that's like, oh, this is a good thing and it's like helpful, but then really it makes people turn towards, oh, well, how do we procure more of this?
Yeah.
Which I think would play into, people farming them, trying to then create, purposely breed out different kinds to produce, a bigger, faster growing, dragon that can be harvested early, right? And then that causes issues with the dragons who say, oh, you're just using us this way, like we're like on par with you, and right, causing some of that division that ultimately causes that grand separation that ends up in the breaking.
I like that. That's really good. I'm really good that you had that you came up with that, Reed. That's very good.
Okay. I'm sorry. I don't think I didn't explain it quite right. I had it in my mind.
No, you did.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, you at least explained the difference. You at least said, no, Levi, you're wrong. This is actually how I was thinking of it, right?
Something like that.
So I think you're fine.
Okay.
You guys have any ideas about what the kind of straw that broke the camel's back would be? Because we have our hero here. Is this any of this wrapped up in your goal, Seth? I'm still trying to think about how the actual beginning events would unfold.
So I think in part of how the hero comes in, I don't think it takes like, it's not just like, oh, he kind of wakes up here, and it's like a year. No, I think it takes like some years of him being here, seeing the world, like kind of deducting, stirring the pot a little bit, pointing out flaws, finding corruption, and really bringing light to a bunch of stuff. And perhaps there's because ultimately the goal would be maybe not the broad goal, but his particular goal would be all of his writings and information on this kind of being recorded and like different thought process to try to make things work better, take how the things work, different thought processes on how that can better this part or how it's lacking in these parts, right? That's kind of a big thing that he does. And I think then, like I put out last time, that a lot of his work then is referenced in then The Trouble in Party Town to the people that then kind of created that new society.
Yeah.
And so I think his goal for this would be to either create a library of different thoughts, right? Which some might be helpful and some might not be helpful, but it's just that, critical thought and meandering on what all he's coming in contact with, what the kind of the base of everything is, how it functions, where its kinks are, right? Which in some cases cause some people to extrapolate on those kinks and things and start getting at each other, perhaps, but also set some thoughts and ideas that other people can take and go, okay, well, here's the thought process on this and how to make these things in society work better, right? Which I think then they eventually do, which then again still comes to where we look at like The Trouble in Party Town, where it's like it worked. And it wasn't, I think in that one, like it wasn't that was the bad guy. It set up a system, right? But even in that, it's got its level of corruption because anything does.
Right.
But I think that's his goal, is to ultimately create the different library of thought and disseminate it between his children or his different students, right? Which then maybe some of it gets lost, maybe some of it's then kept, which then is what kind of comes back out after the breaking as people start putting some of that back together.
Yeah.
In different ways after the breaking. My thought on how it might break out is, let's say he's here for like 50 years. So by the end, he's kind of himself an old man. I don't know, given that, a regular idea of time frame, I don't know. Right. And so he's pretty well known, and maybe there's kind of like a whirl, like all the different kind of like people are coming together because there's like things at the edges and different thought processes now between the dragons, between some humans, different things, and it maybe accumulates into like a I don't know what the word would be, because it's like a UN isn't what I would think, because I don't think there's different nations at this point, or maybe there is.
Just like a world council?
Kind of, where it's like something is called where it's like, okay, like something needs to be done so that it's not like just kind of building in the background. And so something that seems like, oh, okay, we'll get all our, things hashed out here and straighten out before it like blows up.
Yeah.
Right. So it seems
Yeah.
or sounds good, but then that is kind of what sparks where then, let's say, people set in their ways already with their own ideas, kind of then spark this like, well, how can we reason with you when you want to, farm and harvest our kind for your own good? We're better off by it, right? And so something that might start out as something to work towards the better is what boils it down, and kind of maybe people don't go home from there. It starts there in that kind of boiled over,
right,
and then just spreads like wildfire into almost to everyone for their own, spreading from there. That's where my initial thought kind of goes in how.
Yeah, one of the storylines I would want to explore in this would be the monks who have learned, because of the scarcity of dragons, have learned to live without the dragon companionship. Have basically through like solitary meditation have learned to kind of curb their own ambition. And I think because of that, they're befriended by dragons because they refuse to, because they're not tempted by them anymore. Because people's like dragons remember the time when there were enough dragons for everyone, for every man, and man and dragon lived in peace. But like these days, if you have like an intelligent dragon that you're connected to, you're like a powerful and rich person,
Yep.
People use dragons these days like people use bulldozers and things like that, and artillery and stuff like that. And it's like, and so what the dragons do is they take clutches from all around the world and they bring them to these monks and bring them up into the mountains and stow them there. And those are the ones in Trouble in Party Town, which are the giant hatched clutch, right? And that's part of it, is that like all of a sudden, all the dragons start to move away. The old dragons start to die in order to preserve their memory in their children, and start to disappear. And like you see this like tension mounting and mounting and mounting until finally they have to get this council together, like Seth was saying. They have to get this council together, and they have to figure out what they can do to bring things back. And they work and they work and they work, and neither side will concede. And it just kind of devolves into like, then there will be war, and then war starts right there.
Oofta.
Right. Oofta is right. And then my thought is that all of the dragons that people thought were dumb and cowed aren't, right?
They're just long suffering.
Yeah. And so like it takes but a few days before like entire villages or like entire cities are destroyed.
Yeah.
There's measures and countermeasures, warehouse blocks of dragon scales when ignited with fire burn like fire,
Ooh, yeah.
Complex power systems when not tended correctly, destruction. And then there's also there's the watchers, the judges of the change, some of them who have in their selfishness turned towards selfishness, who are trying to guide the world into further chaos and further destruction, and some of them, maybe a couple of them die, maybe some of them live, maybe some of them are injured, it's like a bunch of things happen, but the world kind of gets destroyed and separated into like this long-standing chaos, which is what we eventually see the hero and the companions rise out of to form the country in the Trouble in Party Town, right? That just kind of chaotic soup of strongest wins, slavery, oppression being the order of the day.
It's funny that you bring that up, because my first thought about random insert would be one of the watchers gone bad that just kind of said heck with it, and he teams up with my villain sidekick from the Flash, and just goes into like hedonism and just tries to, he's got the whole, shall we say, bag of tricks of a watcher, but he's just gone corrupted. And he kind of, with his buddy Flash, he kind of leads a movement of debauchery,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I would say that that's totally fine. Yes, absolutely, that happens.
Yes.
And it's terrible and disastrous. Seth, would you imagine that this hero would be sort of alive during? My idea is that the breaking would take about 50 years, right? Of just war, destruction, just a total rearranging of everything. Would you imagine that he would come out of that, or would he die before that happens?
I mean, in the way that I see it, I would almost say that he's already an old man.
Right.
At the beginning of that council, right? And what he has set up by that time would be his different schools of thought and students. And I would say perhaps, I don't know, because again, he's the one that ignites the kiln, right? So I'm thinking that perhaps, at this council, no one can kind of get to a head, and he has, I don't know what they would be, and you've got like 5 or 6 different groups of everyone for their own interests, right? And like he kind of finally stands up and then, perhaps calls it out, and kind of basically does in fact ignite it, that says, so therefore, if you cannot come to any agreement, then I don't know, like
kind
something where then he says that then it's like, well, if you cannot resolve this through reason, then take it into your hands and do what you see best, and the world will burn for it. Right. Which then ignites that he's maybe the first casualty of this, where then some maybe dragon or something kind of then like goes to incinerate him. Well, then maybe another one that maybe is more on his side comes in to try to counter it. But what happens is maybe it turns him to stone, or some kind of like, it incinerates him, but then the other cooling mechanism makes a statue, and perhaps that comes in later, where it's like something throughout the ages, the great philosopher or something that maybe people forget who it might have been, but then that is the thing. I want to say that he is the first quote unquote casualty.
That makes sense.
But that's what it comes down to, is like this whole council, everyone is like just spewing whatever, and it's like, okay, what reason can be had? If this is so, then take it into your own hands and the world will burn for it. I don't know, that's what I'm coming up with, is kind of like something
good.
Cool to start it off with. And then it kind of ignites the anger of kind of one of the dragons that's for the dragons' sake, right? And goes to burn him. Well, then maybe another one steps up and like does something else, to protect from the flame. But ultimately what it does is solidify him into kind of more of an ashen statue.
Yeah.
That's then like glazed over.
Yeah.
So he dies, but it ignites, in matter of fact, does then ignite the kiln, as it would be.
Right.
And perhaps almost anyone at that council, I would say, after what happened, no one really survived that was at that council, would make sense.
Okay.
Maybe there was like 2 or 3 people that got out, but out of, let's say, the several hundred or thousand, because it's all like the top people, right? And of course, if they go there and the report comes back that, it's ignited and they killed right, that just ignites even more.
Right. So part of my thought for the happy ending was that the dragon that Xander gets in Trouble in Party Town is the direct descendant of the hero's dragon, or the hero's friend, the dragon, if the hero didn't actually bond with one, however that would work. And so the idea being that maybe the whole council chamber was kind of, that he was turned to stone, but also the whole council chamber was kind of destroyed in the fight, but yet then preserved. And it is in fact the cave where Xander finds the egg, so many years later, 50, 200 years or so later. where then there's the egg there, and then this dragon hatches, and then that's what one of the things that sets Xander and his dragon apart, is because this isn't just any dragon. This is the dragon that the hero, the bronze philosopher, right? Because he was bronzed, right, when he died. Whatever remnants of him people could remember.
Yeah.
It was preserved in this, and that's what sets Xander and his dragon apart, besides the fact that Xander's the king. That's what sets them apart in the next book, is that this is in fact the hero's dragon's descendant. And that's the good ending, is that all the hero's wisdom, all the hero's thoughts and words and musings were preserved. And that's what eventually leads the way for Xander being such a great hero and such a great leader himself. What do you think of that?
That sounds good.
I like it.
So while the whole rest of the world burns and kills itself and destroys, this little part is preserved. And that would kind of make sense, because we wanted Xander to also be a rough descendant of the hero. So one of the hero's children, one of his children's children would be this king who would have founded Party Town, with his 100 companions. And so it all takes place in kind of roughly the same 100 or 200 miles area. It's like, because the hero's son was there when the council was taking place. He was at this epicenter of the breaking. He wasn't in the room, but he saw it go flash and seal off. And so he fought his way out and kind of held his ground. And then, they kind of protected that castle where the meeting was, which kind of devolved into this is where he's from, which devolved into this is where Party Town was put later. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It makes sense.
Cool. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, you guys have any other interesting things you want to add to this? Reed?
I was just
Seth?
thinking,
You guys aren't ladies and gentlemen, but
yeah, go ahead.
No, I think it's good.
I was thinking of I had two kind of fun thoughts. Well, one of the things I thought about the League of Nations, that they formed at the end of World War I, and it became kind of like, it became just this ineffectual thing, and kind of came apart and led to World War II, really.
right.
And then the other thing that I thought about with just the whole the beginning scene I've been thinking in the back of my mind, what is this from in my mind? And it just clicked. Did you ever read the Cast Upon an Alien Shore series? Are you familiar with that?
I am not familiar. I think I've heard you talk about
this. I think I've read like 6-7 books. There might be a couple more out there, but basically there was an alien surveillance of our world. And they had these high-tech unmanned satellites that were just, picking up on everything that's happening on Earth. And they're very sophisticated. So, like, for example, if they would be struck by a meteor, they had a power, shields, like you would say on Star Trek, right? Well, with one thing and another, they failed to notice that there was they paid attention to airline traffic and whatnot, but there was a charter flight with a couple hundred people on it that actually intersected with one of these surveillance drones, and it just disintegrated. And they thought, oh no, we're like this advanced civilization, and this is just an accident. So they just kind of plucked the hurtling victims out of the air and brought them aboard a ship and patched them up. And then they just put this guy naked on the shore of this other Earth-like planet that was in like the 1700s as far as technology, or the 1600s. And here he is, a guy that is like a scientist going to present this big paper. So he's got like a whole bunch of skills, and it's like kind of dropped into their society, has to learn the language and figure out how everything works, and then starts introducing things like artillery and anyway, there's elements of this guy in our hero in the beginning scene kind of being plucked from elsewhere and dropped in,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait, It Gets Better. Join us next week as we sit around and discuss our inspirations, what books we thought that this reminded us of, what rating we give it, and if we can ever go on after writing such a great story. Until next time, don't forget to wait, because it gets better.